Hi debaters, this is a series of topic lectures on the 2026-2027 National Health Insurance topic brought to you by Michigan State University. My name is Maggie Berthiaume and I'm Director of Debate at Woodward Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. If you haven't already watched the first video on the status quo and how we got here, I'd recommend watching that now. This video will talk about affirmative arguments on the topic, and then part 3 will discuss major negative arguments. Part 2, Affirmatives on the 2026-2027 National Health Insurance topic. When looking at AFs, the core words in the resolution are National Health Insurance. In essence, National Health Insurance, or NHI, refers to a system where the government provides health insurance to all citizens, ensuring that healthcare is accessible, equitable, and often funded through taxation. This concept is pivotal because it frames the debate around healthcare and how it should be funded and structured. Many definitions of NHI require 3 things: universal coverage, insurance provided by the government, and comprehensive benefits. Some definitions will quibble about one or more of these factors, but if an AF is all 3 of these, it is almost certainly national health insurance. When you're reading about things that definitely qualify as NHI, you'll see 2 things in the literature a lot: single-payer programs and Medicare for All. We'll start with those. While Medicare for All is an example of a type of single-payer system, the converse is not true. Not all single-payer healthcare systems are Medicare for All. It may help to think of the Venn diagram with a large circle labeled single-payer systems. Medicare for All is a much smaller circle inside that larger circle. Confusingly, some articles will use these terms interchangeably, even saying things like single-payer national health insurance, also known as Medicare for All. For now, we'll talk about single-payer plans generally first, and then turn to some specific of the Medicare for All proposals. In a single-payer plan, the government acts as the health insurance company for everyone. While single-payer plans differ on the details, here are the main features. Instead of a private insurance companies competing with each other, a single public system provides health coverage for all residents. This creates a unified system where everyone is insured under the same basic program. Healthcare will then be funded mainly through taxes instead of private premiums. People contribute mainly to the system through taxes, rather than monthly insurance payments to private companies as they do now. Supporters argue that this spreads costs more broadly across society and reduces financial barriers to care. Coverage is also universal and not tied to employment. People can keep their health insurance regardless of whether they change jobs, lose employment, or retire. This separates access from healthcare from a person's workplace or income level. The government will also pay doctors and hospitals directly as the single insurer. Hospitals and providers will bill one public insurance system rather than many different private insurers as they do now. Advocates argue this simplifies billing and reduces administrative complexity. Under most single-payer plans, benefits are comprehensive, including hospital, primary, and preventative care. Most of these proposals aim to cover a wide range of medical services under this single plan. Patients also generally don't have any deductibles, or they have very low deductibles, copays, or other out-of-pocket costs. People are usually able to receive care without upfront payments at the point of service. Supporters argue that this makes it easier for patients to seek treatment before health problems become more severe. Again, Medicare for All is a specific type of single-payer plan. Some advocates argue that there are specific elements and benefits of Medicare for All, or MFA, compared to other single-payer plans. One would be that it expands the existing Medicare program. Medicare for All proposals generally take the current Medicare system, which mainly covers Americans over age 65, and extend it to the entire population. Supporters argue that this is easier politically and administratively than designing a completely new health system from scratch. Most versions also include expanded benefits. A lot of the Medicare for All proposals go beyond traditional Medicare by offering services like dental care, vision, hearing aids, mental health treatment, and prescription drugs. Advocates argue that these expanded benefits are necessary because basic health needs often extend beyond hospital and physician services, which is what Medicare offers now. These proposals also allow patients to visit any doctor or hospital that accepts the national Medicare program. Instead of relying on narrow insurance networks, patients would generally be free to choose among providers nationwide. Supporters argue this increases flexibility and reduces problems caused by out-of-network billing. Medicare for All also builds on the name recognition and administrative structure of the current Medicare system, rather than creating an entirely new framework. Because Medicare already exists as a large federal health insurance program, Medicare for All proposals would use many of its existing systems for enrollment and payment. Advocates argue that familiarity with the Medicare brand may also make the proposal easier for the public to understand and support. The next set of affirmatives are what I like to call plausibly national health insurance. These AFs will likely have more topicality debates than that first set, but they are also likely to be very broadly read on the topic. They are universal catastrophic care, a public option for insurance, and expanding or revising the Affordable Care Act. Let's start with universal catastrophic care, or UCC. This is sometimes also called a high deductible plan. Here are the main features of this type of program. Universal catastrophic care plans are designed to step in when a person faces extremely expensive medical situations, such as a cancer treatment, major surgery, or long hospital stay. The goal is to ensure that no one is financially ruined by severe illness or injury. Under most universal catastrophic care models, individuals would still pay for ordinary medical expenses like routine doctor visits or minor treatments until they reach a certain spending threshold. Supporter argues that this encourages more cost-conscious use of everyday health services. One of the central goals of universal catastrophic coverage is to prevent families from facing overwhelming medical debt after that serious crisis. Advocates argue that even if people pay more for routine care, they should still be protected from life-altering financial catastrophe. Unlike single-payer systems, universal catastrophic care proposals usually preserve a significant role for private insurance companies. People may purchase supplemental plans to help cover routine care, deductibles, or services not included by the catastrophic plan. Some supporters believe universal catastrophic care is easier to pass politically because it costs less than comprehensive universal coverage proposals, and it preserves elements of the private insurance market. Advocates argue it may attract support from moderates who want broader coverage without fully replacing the current system. The reason this AF might not be topical is that some definitions of NHI say it means comprehensive coverage, or a plan that covers all or nearly all types of medical care. UCC only covers the most severe of problems. Another proposal in this category is called the public option. A public option would create a government-sponsored insurance plan that people could compare directly with private insurance companies. Supporters argue this competition could pressure private insurers to lower prices and improve coverage. Under most public option proposals, people who like their current employer-sponsored insurance could keep it. The public option would simply provide another choice for people seeking coverage. Unlike single-payer systems, a public option does not eliminate that private insurance or move everyone into that government plan. That might make it more moderate and more politically achievable. Advocates argue that the government-run public option plan could offer lower prices or broader coverage than private insurers and gradually attract more customers over time, shifting power away from insurance companies, but in a smoother transition than other proposals. This is in the plausibly NHI section because it would not be universal. Everyone would have the choice to enroll, but they would not be in the public option automatically. Some definitions of NHI say this is fine, and others do not, so the affirmative team that selects a public option AF is likely to have many topicality debates. There are also a number of changes to the ACA that affirmatives might choose to adopt. A lot of these are likely to be combined into a single proposal by the affirmative team. One would be restoring the individual mandate penalties. Remember, the Affordable Care Act originally included a financial penalty for people who choose not to obtain health insurance, but Congress later reduced that penalty to zero. Supporters of restoring that mandate argue that it would encourage healthier people to enroll in insurance markets, lowering premiums and stabling coverage costs. The affirmative could also restore the enhanced subsidies. Temporary expansions of ACA premium subsidies during COVID made health insurance more affordable for many middle and lower income Americans. Advocates argue that extending or restoring these enhanced subsidies would reduce the number of uninsured people and make market plans more financially accessible. The affirmative could also choose to adopt automatic enrollment. That means people would sign eligible uninsured individuals up for health coverage unless they actively choose to opt out. Supporters argue that this could significantly increase coverage rates by reducing administrative barriers and helping people who qualify for insurance but never complete the enrollment process. Some studies suggest that up to a quarter of people who are eligible for free insurance do not have it because they are not aware of the difficult insurance enrollment process. The affirmative could also adopt Medicaid expansion. The ACA allowed states to expand Medicaid eligibility to more low-income adults, but some states declined to participate. Advocates argue that further Medicaid expansion through the federal government would close those coverage gaps, reducing uninsured rates and improving access to care for low-income populations. A final example of ACA reform would provide a public option within the ACA. Individually, most of these fall short of national health insurance because they are not universal, but combined, some of them do reach universal or close to universal status. When thinking about different NHI models, it can be helpful to compare them on some of the same metrics that experts in the field use. These include access and coverage, cost and affordability, the difficulty of the transition, and political feasibility. The first issue is coverage and access. Which system actually gets closest to universal health insurance? Some proposals, like ACA reform, improve coverage but may still leave gaps. Other, like Medicare for All or other single-payer programs, aim for automatic coverage for everyone. But universal can mean different things. Legal universality means everyone is technically eligible, even if enrollment is complicated. Functional universality means people are actually enrolled. But some experts go even further and argue that universality means people can realistically use care without barriers like long wait times or unaffordable costs. This matters because the goal of health insurance is access to care, not just having an insurance card in your wallet. A system can provide so-called universal coverage on paper while still making it very hard for people to access that care in practice. Debaters will need to pay close attention to how easy a proposal actually makes it for people to get and keep care. In debate terms, this is a question of solvency. If the affirmative advantage relies on people receiving medical care, the negative can argue the plan doesn't really solve if large groups still fall through the cracks. Tweaks like expanding the ACA or universal catastrophic coverage provide broad but somewhat unstable coverage. Policies like restoring enhanced subsidies, bringing back the individual mandate, or adding automatic enrollment could push those policies closer to true universality. The ACA also has a practical advantage because reforms could happen quickly. Still, the system still relies tied to income eligibility, annual enrollment periods, and employer-based coverage, so people can lose coverage when jobs or income change. Single payer has a much stronger argument for universal coverage because most versions automatically enroll everyone, regardless of income or employment. People would not lose coverage if they change jobs or experience financial changes. However, access could still depend on whether providers accept the program and whether the system has enough capacity to meet the demand. Compared to smaller reforms like the ACA, though, Medicare for All has a much stronger claim to true universal coverage. A second major issue is cost and affordability. The U.S. spends far more on healthcare than other wealthy countries, and still, many Americans struggle to afford care. So the key question becomes, which system lowers costs while making healthcare accessible? In debate, costs matter in two ways. First, if people can still not afford care, then the affirmative is really not solving the problem. Second, negatives will often argue that healthcare itself or the proposed reform is too expensive. Healthcare costs show up throughout the system. Multi-payer systems, like our current model, have high administrative costs because they involve many insurers, billing systems, and eligibility rules. Single-payer systems reduce a lot of that complexity. At the same time, though, broader coverage means more people use healthcare, which can increase overall health spending. Reforms to the system, like reforming the ACA, could reduce some costs by expanding subsidies and increasing competitions among insurance plans. But they largely keep the complicated multi-payer structure in place, so they may not fully address the biggest drivers of rising prices. UCC falls in this category as well, as does the public option. Single-payer, or Medicare for All, offer larger potential savings because they simplify the system and give the federal government more bargaining power over drug companies and providers. Supporters see this as a major advantage. Critics respond that increased demand for care and political resistance from hospitals and pharmaceutical companies could limit those savings. Ultimately, all insurance proposals depend on political willingness to regulate prices. In debate, there is often a tension between claiming a plan dramatically cuts costs and complaining it will be politically popular, since powerful industries are likely to resist major reforms. For experts researching health insurance, a huge question is the transition between the status quo and NHI, or how do we get there from here? There is a balance between incremental changes, which have lower potential to solve problems, but also lower transition difficulties, and revolutionary changes where you can potentially solve bigger problems, but the transition is much more challenging. A core question that both AF and NEG teams should ask when evaluating NHI proposals is, who loses? That means investigating what groups of people are benefiting from the current system who might be disadvantaged in the transition to an NHI system. For example, under single payer, people currently employed by a health insurance company would likely lose their job. That creates a big transition cost. Similarly, there are changes in payments to providers, like doctors and hospitals, and the administrative difficulties in shifting to a new system. Does everyone need to get a new doctor? What effect will this have on the labor market? These are all things to consider when evaluating different proposals. Finally, AF teams will want to look at the political feasibility of their proposal. We'll talk about this more in the third video about negative arguments, but healthcare and insurance can be hot-button issues. In policy debate, the concept of fiat, which means let it be done in Latin, says that we imagine something happens, and then we debate about whether that would be a good idea or not. We sideline issues of whether it would actually happen. Notably, the current Congress and presidential administration is very unlikely to pass NHI. But feasibility can also have solvency implications. If there is significant backlash to a policy, it can create institutional constraints on change that reduce the ability of the affirmative to solve their advantage. On the other hand, some NHI proposals, like Medicare for All, tend to be relatively popular with the public, which may make them more feasible politically. This was the second of 3 videos in this series. The final video will discuss negative arguments on the topic. Happy debating!